So if we have a look inside the newsroom, I think this will also help you just to understand how journalists work. That very often there's daily publications versus weekly publications. And journalists will most times have pitch meetings in the mornings where they need to pitch different stories to their editors, and their editors need to buy in to these specific stories. So, for example, Sunday papers come out obviously on a Sunday, but then it's very unlikely that you'll find a journalist in a weekend journalist in on a Monday morning. So it wouldn't help to send through a story on a Monday morning to weekend papers. You would send it later in the week when you pitch it to them. Deadlines, deadlines, deadlines. I think this is such a key thing, and we've seen it happen so often where we organize a media interview and the person then says that they're not available, or they don't provide the information on time. The journalist is still going to run with the story, whether or not they have all the information or not. And obviously, we can't say to a journalist, no, that time of the interview doesn't suit us, especially if it's a radio interview, because they need to submit their stories. They need to record the interviews. So it's so imperative. It's critical that the deadlines of the journalists are met. And part of that is we want to make the life of the journalist as easy as possible. I mean, there's such a pressure in the media space as it is. I mean, we've just seen so many things happening in this space. And journalists are under so much pressure. The easier we can make their lives, the more likely they will run with the story, and they will help you to get your message as a company across. So yeah, you will make friends with journalists by meeting their deadlines. So very, very broadly speaking, the journalist pitches a story to the news editor. This then gets approved and goes through to a sub-editor that will go through the content. It goes to the layout, and then the editor will have an overall look at the story and layout. The journalists build up the reputation for delivery quality stories in a specific beat. So every journalist has a specific area that they will look at. So there's some journalists that focus just on environment. There's some that just does the motoring. There's some that does just food and beverage, as an example. So it's really important to build that relationship and to understand what the different journalists in different areas. Again, as I mentioned, journalists are under a lot of pressure, and they are needing to cover a lot of topics. But that's again what helps if you can build that relationship with a journalist and understand what type of stories they're looking for, what angles are they looking for. So get to know the journalist, invite them for a coffee, hear what they are looking for in terms of the story. Introduce yourself to them as well. Let them know. So even if you're meeting with a journalist, it might not result in an immediate story, but at least you've introduced yourself to them. You also understand what angle they are looking for, and you can build that relationship. So if something happens, you can let that journalist know, make sure that you send through the right information, because you know that that is what they're after. So it's all about relationship building. It's really tricky, and you can't really start building a relationship during a crisis. So if you can build that relationship with key media, so that's also something for you to consider, is to have a look at who are the key media that you want your organization to be profiled in, and then start looking at who those journalists are to build a relationship with. Understand how it works inside the media. So we've just had a very brief touch on that, but it is important to, as you build that relationship with the journalist, to understand what their requirements are, their deadlines, what angles they're looking for. Make sure that they have your contact details and have their contact details as well. So when they phone you, then at least you know that you can say, "Hi, Bob," and you know that which publication they're phoning from. And that's part of building that relationship. If you have a story, then you let Bob know as well. So having their contact information, making sure they have your contact information, and only sending relevant releases to them. There's a wonderful saying in the PR industry, a spray and pray approach. And that's awful. You don't want to have a media release that you've spent a lot of time on and just sending that to everyone on your mailing list, spraying and then praying somebody will pick it up. You want to make sure that it's customized for your specific journalist, that you are absolutely making it usable for them. Speed, be quick, be careful, and very importantly, confirm everything in writing. This will also just help if there's any follow-ups that's needed. If you don't have all the information, let the journalist know. If you have to fact check something, let them know. But what's important is get back to them. Meet their deadlines. If you can't fact check, if you're unable to confirm that the information is verified, let them know as well. I think this is really, really key. It's terrible just to keep quiet, and it's all part of building that relationship. Having things in writing is just normal good business practice, not just for the media, but to always have that audit trail of what was said, what was confirmed. And also, it is just good practice to have everything in writing, because if something goes wrong and it's not what you agreed upon, it's a lot easier to recall and to go back to it, and to have that corrected at a later stage. Give as much information as possible, as legally possible. Very often, and especially in a crisis scenario, it is quite tricky to give all the information, and especially if there's lawyers and things involved. But if a situation is under investigation, say so. Say we are currently investigating, and as soon as more information is available, we will let you know, because at least that is telling what is being done at the moment. There is no such thing as off the record, because if you think of it, how many press releases there are that land on a journalist's in a journalist's inbox on a daily basis. All the interviews that they have, all the people that they're engaging with, the information they have to deal with. If you tell somebody it's off the record, I mean, if you just think about yourself, if somebody's told you something 3 weeks or 3 months ago, are you going to remember whether it was on the record, off the record? If you don't want it out in the public space, don't share it. I think that's just the easiest advice. There is no such thing as off the record. So don't do anything off the record. And no comment is a comment. If you're going to say no comment, then everybody reading that no comment is going to fill that gap. We're going to fill that no comment gap with their own comment. So rather say you're busy investigating. Give the information that you are able to give. Once you have more information, make sure that you share it as well. But to say no comment is absolutely just opening yourself up and for so much reputational risk and damage.